Korean hero terrorists, but since they had the return hero, the Justice League wasn't even scared. However, right at the moment the nuke went off, Sun Jun confessed to the sword hero that he was the one who killed his parents. Let's continue from this point. Time is an unrelenting abstraction that keeps moving forward. It will never turn back for anyone. Only if you. Not a hero of return. Seon Jun came back right before he sent the Americans the recordings with Spear Hero. The government agents he'd already taken out were dead, so no one could help with the letter in English either.
We were in for more trouble. Mace of God.
The latest top-secret US weapon has locked onto a target on the Korean peninsula. The captain and his teammate pulled out the keys. They inserted them into the designated wells, and by turning them simultaneously under the glow of green and red lights, activated battle mode. The captain reported that they're ready and awaiting orders to open fire. The assistant asked the boss whether he had ever had to work on a rocket launch. At least at practice. The captain admitted he had never done this before. This is a weapon of terrifying destructive power. But what wouldn't you do for world peace? Especially when the president gives a direct order. Thinking about it, the captain pressed the red button. And the rockets stayed where they were. The man pressed the button several more times, after which it lit up with a purple light that enveloped the entire satellite. The instruments crackled, and the transformation hero appeared on the screens. He completely took over control, but even so, the satellite still launched missiles. Mr. President, leading the press conference, had no idea. But his bodyguards, having received the message, immediately began to take him to safety. However, they were not destined to get ahead of the nuclear missiles that fell on Washington. That day, 16 US nuclear warheads exploded around the world. Paris, Beijing, New Delhi, Cairo. All key decision-making centers were destroyed in a matter of seconds. The U.S. Transportation Secretary, who was on a business trip, learned about it from the news. His phone rang right away. Soon, security escorted him to a secret building. The thing was, the president, the vice president, and all the cabinet members were killed in the God Club attack. The transport minister turned out to be the only surviving member of the government, so a decision was made to urgently inaugurate the new president. After some time, 2 suitcases were brought to the secret bunker. One of them was nuclear, with all the information about the available nuclear weapons, fully ready for use at the push of a button. On the second, a direct connection was established with the transformation hero. The president jumped in surprise, not understanding why he should talk to a terrorist. But as it turned out, there are 2 heroes of transformation. It first appeared in Europe about 100 years ago. It was thanks to his help that both world wars were brought to an end. And America became the most advanced power in the world and a leader in science and technology. And now the president had a direct line to this very hero of transformation from the past. About once every 100 years, one of the dead, regardless of time or place, after death, ended up in another world to become a hero. After defeating the demon, the hero returned to his world and had an incredible impact on human civilization. Someone became the hero of myths and legends. Someone united thousands of people under their command and built entire empires. And some became engines of science and technological progress. And all this time, the heroes lived hand in hand with ordinary people. That's Sun Jun's assumption, based on his observations. The ghoul strained himself, which means other countries have their own heroes too. The heroine Vera immediately understood where all the legends and myths came from. And the Steel Fist didn't care at all. Even he, with his perfect body, isn't immortal. Which means the others are long dead too, from old age or illness. However, Hannah thought that wasn't the case. For example, it can definitely live more than a few hundred years. Take the Transformer, for example. He can't really be called a person. If you don't destroy the main body and give access to the technology, then he could live for 1,000 years. Song Joon completely agreed with that. And most likely, if they're going to take on the whole world, they'll also run into other heroes.
Silicon Valley, California.
The new president learned that Einstein, Tesla, and Newman were just avatars of one and the same transformation heroine, who had long existed in a shell unlike that of an ordinary human. The heroine assumed that this visit was connected to the recent actions of the terrorists, with the superpowers from Korea. And the president admitted that at first he was pretty skeptical about her abilities, but after seeing what he saw, he was convinced she was capable of standing up to those bastards. A big furball bent a knee, and the dumb bodyguards instantly tensed up, as if they could actually do anything to that huge robot. Previous presidents didn't want to rely on me, because I'm not human. They wanted only people to bring changes to this world.
And I understand them.
But I'm grateful that today you reached out to me.
I won't let you down.
A memory surfaced in the heroine's mind of returning to Earth and ending up among soldiers of the U.S. Army in World War I. And despite how she looked, the guys helped the heroine. Thinking about it, the girl replied that this country had welcomed and supported her. That's why Mary Stevenson will do anything to protect America. In the Vatican's secret underground dungeon, a sarcophagus sealed with chains was lifted from a huge basin of molten metal. The cardinal asked the Pope what was inside. He always believed that one of the many holy relics was there, but now he's no longer sure of that. The Pope replied that inside was God's messenger, who performed the last miracle in the 14th century. Saint Damien, the last hero of faith. At the same time, in a small village in the Sakha Republic of Russia, the military arrived at one of the unremarkable houses, no different from the others. An old gray-haired man, covered in medals, opened the door. "You're retired General Ivan Pushkin, right?"
"That's right."
The soldiers immediately saluted in respect. Ivan Pushkin, a hero whose deeds are not recorded in history. Mother Russia is calling you. The ice hero Ivan Pushkin is back in action to restore order among the youth. Nuclear bombs exploding all over the world plunged relations between states into chaos. There could be no question of an assembly of Allied troops, since all free people put on protective suits and went to fight the residual radiation. So, the transformation hero made it unimpeded to the Los Angeles coast. He lifted 70% of the restrictions on his suit and activated destruction mode. Meanwhile, the vampire who had gone to Egypt was also having fun, creating a huge skull from the blood of 200,000 people. And in southern Italy, the heroine's flock of the faithful reached unprecedented sizes. So, each of the heroes managed to create their own kingdom of sorrow. Kim Min-soo himself went north to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. On the approach to Pyongyang, he was met by a defensive line of several dozen tanks. At the same time, the people's leader was informed that the last line remained. Kim Jong-un couldn't understand how a person could cross a minefield. The answer was banal. The sword hero just walked through it, and not a single explosion could hurt him. The leader was sure that Russia and China would not abandon them to their fate and had to send their heroes to defend their allies. So, all that had to be done was hold the sword hero until reinforcements arrived. All tanks were ordered to open fire, and dozens of shells were fired at one single target. But Min-soo, lost in his grief, didn't even try to dodge.
A volley shook the ground.
The commander climbed out of the tank to inspect the destruction with binoculars. An enormous sinkhole formed in the ground. No one could have survived that. And yet, in the blast's haze, a human silhouette emerged, under the protection of the goddess Seraphima herself. Without hurrying, Min-soo summoned his sword, and the tank company commander ordered them to reopen fire. But one swing of the hero's weapon triggered an explosion far more powerful and wiped part of North Korea's capital off the map, turning it into a scorched desert with no trace of human civilization. Min-soo continued on his way. He moved forward, destroying everything in his path. The guy wasn't in any hurry, but the border of his kingdom of sorrow kept expanding, until an old man appeared in Min-soo's path.
"So it's you."
That pup who wants the world to sink back into the fires of hell. Long ago, the Führer, waiting for news of the capture of Leningrad, flew into a rage when he learned that his invincible army had not only been unable to complete its mission, but had also retreated. Adolf couldn't believe that 2 land divisions, 2 armored regiments, Junos, the hero of Golem, and Siegfried, the hero of the sword, could lose to anyone. Then the world still didn't know what fierce cold, stopping everything in the world, lurked in the depths of Russia. By then, the no longer young Red Army soldier Ivan Pushkin was the only one whom this cold did no harm.
You're her hero.
Why are you taking the human side?
What's wrong? Not even pride. Pride? Of course.
Ivan forged an axe of ice and raised it over his head. My pride is in ending the war and sending soldiers back into their families' arms.
So that's how it is.
Not the conquest of the world, but its salvation? Those were Siegfried's last words, because Ivan tore off his head. Pushkin's world was always divided into black and white, so killing in the name of world peace was very easy for him. Even now, Ivan could see only black before him. Minsu guessed that this old man was a hero, and Pushkin confirmed it. The swordsman immediately raised his weapon for a crushing blow, but...
Wait.
Before I kill you, I want to ask you something. Minsu froze, waiting for the question.
What do you want?
Why did you sow this chaos? Swordsman infused the Duran with energy, and said he now didn't know the answer to that question himself, then attacked the opponent with an overhead strike. Well, the old man figured that too. He opened his mouth, and an icy turtle appeared on his tongue. In the next instant, the blast reached Pushkin, but when the smoke cleared, Minsu saw a giant ice turtle that had blocked his strike. Ivan turned out to be not just a fighter, but a hero with summoning magic. The sword hero realized he wouldn't be easy to deal with. I haven't even started yet, pup. The old man filled the light with air to the brim, then immediately unleashed a powerful icy blast. A whole region turned into a freezing chamber with extreme cold. Minsu is frozen over too. The old man admitted that the puppy was pretty strong, since an ordinary person would have died from that kind of cold right away. But the sword hero didn't even blink. But this cold had an unusual property. He partially blocked the hero's power, because most of it was going into restoring his body from frostbite. And while Minsu comes to, the old man can finish at his own pace. After punching the summoned turtle in the belly, Ivan sent it at his opponent. But right before the collision, the guy managed to shift a little. Turtle, after slamming into the hero, knocked him backward and, covering everything in ice, froze Minsu to the ground. Listen, pup, you don't happen to have any adaptation skills, do you? Having said that, the old man stuck out his tongue, and there was a little cutie on it. But a moment later, he turned into a giant brown bear made of ice. The clawed paw immediately slammed Minsu into the ground. Blood sprayed from the guy's mouth, and the bear kept beating him. Without wasting a second, the ice hero summoned a flock of birds that swooped down on the battered puppy. Death was closer to Mince than ever. But he called in Durant, who split the bear in two. A full set of armor let him get back on his feet. Then Duran was filled with the power of sorrow, and with one blow, he knocked the old man's head off his shoulders. Ivan's gaze grew colder than usual. And a moment later he fell. Usually, a mage outmatches a warrior in battle. With only one way to attack from a distance, the warrior doesn't have time to understand where the next blow will come from, and ends up buried under an avalanche of different spells. But Minsu knew that, so he didn't resist and waited for the right moment to attack. After all, he'd already fought another wizard. Then the swordsman understood that in a duel against a mage, he had to endure every blow steadfastly until the very last moment. And when the enemy has already decided he's won and lets down his guard, you need to decapitate him with one powerful attack. However, now, as the Korean Dantes stood over the fallen Pushkin, he was gripped by a strange tingling feeling, predicting that the battle was not over yet. Minsu didn't feel satisfied that the superhero had lived for over 100 years. He should have felt power superiority, but
that simply didn't happen. There was no taste of victory.
Anxiety gradually turned into fear. Thinking about it, Minsu noticed that not even a drop of blood had come out of the old man's severed head. The next moment, Pushkin's body started to crack. And then the unhurt Ivan burst free from it, lunging at the puppy and piercing it with an icy blade. Another stream of blood flew out of the sword hero's mouth. "You're too fixated on your opponent's neck, pup." Swordsman raised the Duran to attack and brought it down on the old man. But Pushkin had foreseen this too, so he prepared the squid in advance. A giant ice tentacle materialized in midair and just took out the arrogant pup. Just barely getting to his feet, the swordsman felt that the chill from Grandpa's blade spreads from the heart itself. Even the goddess's protection can't save you from this cold. Minsu realized that the longer he fought, the less strength he had left. And the old man understood that perfectly too, so he stuck out his tongue again, on which sat the mini whale, now turned into an incredible giant that eclipsed all of Pushkin's earlier summons. But the guy found the strength and split Moby Dick in half with one blow. When the swordsman's hand trembled, Ivan understood that the cold was doing its work. And soon all the madness and chaos sowed by this pup will end.
Like his life.
Thinking about it, the old man clacked his jaw and turned the whale's body into two huge ice wolves. The last sword hero lost because of this attack. But this pup clearly showed that he'd be a handful. There were about 30 seconds left before complete frostbite. Feeling numb, Minsu used his strongest slashing technique. A sphere that cuts through everything seemed to form around him, unleashing chaotic bursts of energy that split the wolves in half. When the swordsman was done, he went at Ivan with two blades. Pushkin was surprised by the enemy's strength of spirit, but in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really matter. When Minsu lunged forward, little toy soldiers started spilling out of Ivan's mouth. This is one of the strongest techniques. Ice-cold corpses. In the blink of an eye, the swordsman was surrounded by an army of Nazis, along with the former golem hero Yunos and the sword hero Siegfried. And then the decisive 30 seconds began, which would determine the winner. The ice hero Ivan Pushkin, a simple boy, Vanya from the Russian countryside, grew up in a poor family. For a sack of flour, he went to war. In 1916, when Vanya's comrades were dying one after another, and the few who were still alive desperately tried to kill as many enemies as possible before dying, Ivan, hiding in the trenches, realized he could no longer bear it. And fate answered his pleas, sending a grenade right at his feet. And yet this boy, this young soldier, wanted only one thing more than anything in the world: a peaceful sky over the heads of ordinary people. And this desire stayed with Pushkin throughout his long life. So ordinary people can live without war.
He'll kill anyone.
Minsu cut down the ice dead one after another, while Pushkin, bleeding, kept summoning the spirits of the dead. With each second, thousands of the dead kept falling beneath the hero of the sword's unstoppable swings. Tens of icy hands from the golem hero lunged at Minsu and managed to stop him. But only for a brief moment. Another eruption of all-destroying slashes turned everything around him to dust. Despite the fact that almost no enemies remained, the sword hero's body was being frozen tighter and tighter by the bitter frost. When he tried to get up, his hand crumbled. Minsu felt like he was playing a chess match against someone who kept adding new pieces to the board. However, even then, Dead Inside refused to lose. With the second sword in his teeth, he stood up to fight to the end. Because Minsu couldn't calm down, since he wanted to make as many people suffer as possible. With these thoughts, the swordsman charged into the attack. Like a brilliant flash, he swept through the ice army, destroying everything in his path. Swordsman poured out the anger and sorrow he'd been holding in all this time. I see, he turned into a monster. Having said that, Grandpa watched a little longer as Minsu kept breaking up the ice chunks. After that, Pushkin launched into the attack to cool the puppy's head. With that cry, Ivan seized his opponent's crown and poured an incredible amount of cold into him. Everything around me froze in an instant. And the guy finally stopped. After all, once trapped in eternal ice, even a hero can't do anything. I'm too old for this kind of thing. But at least in the end, he managed to stop the war. Now you can finally rest. And when the old man was ready to accept his death, a blazing comet fell from the sky. Pushkin immediately looked into the epicenter of the explosion and saw there the fantasy squad from another world. Seeing Minsu, the elf and the dwarf immediately called him a hero. And then the old man realized in horror that these were the puppy's companions from another world, the one with which he had defeated the demon. Seeing their friend encased in ice, the squad immediately decided they had to save their comrade at all costs. The heroine of Vera, hanging in the sky with her flock and leaving destruction behind, did not know that the Air Force was approaching her. Fighter jets locked onto the target and, after receiving the order to open fire, launched missiles. However, Hannah noticed the weapon of the godless, which could not harm her in any way. At that moment, two men asked him to perform a miracle. And the heroine, granting their wish, turned the rockets into flower petals, sacrificing two believers for it. Jesus, the missiles aren't working. Damn it, attacking again, lower the flight level. I didn't hear you. We're running it again. What the hell, petals? 3 fighter jets just broke apart into beautiful petals. This is the miracle. While Hannah was standing there frozen, a naval volley came down on her flock. Of course, they too were headed for oblivion. Upon receiving word that all the forces sent were destroyed, the chief of staff realized he could not fight the power this maniac calls a miracle. You wouldn't call that a miracle. Let me show you a real miracle instead. This is Saint Damien Arcadius. The guy knew that everyone had already forgotten him, but he still counted on their faith. With those words, Arcadius walked through the screen, as if it were a portal. Saint Damien first appeared during a raging plague and took on all of humanity's illnesses. And now there are honey trails left on the floor behind him. A moment later, in the form of a 6-winged seraphim, Damien appeared before Vera's heroine and her followers. Hannah was surprised that Vera's hero had really existed before, and she was glad to meet him in person. But Arcadius, seeing the believers, was troubled that they felt nothing but fear. As soon as the guy said that, Hannah remembered how the priest had come to visit the poor girl once again. I think there's no need to explain what that bastard did to her. Those memories triggered Hannah, and she sacrificed 10 members of her flock, which allowed her to summon the fallen angel of peace, Daniel. His huge head emerged from the storm clouds. Then a giant demonic body appeared. With its toothy maw open, the monster fired a beam of energy at the guy floating in front of it. But Damien had no intention of backing down. Hannah, the heroine Vera Back, had been an inseparable part of her mother Back Hannah's world since childhood. She believed in the Lord fervently, and gradually her daughter, moved by this teaching, also began to believe. Hannah prayed that her mom would be happy. Society, and especially her classmates, were not ready to accept such unwavering faith. And so the girl quickly became the target of mockery. But her mother never complained about the hard life, because God was always with her. So Hannah too shed tears, not daring to complain about her hard fate. But after that incident, one day, they stayed behind in the church with Mom after the service, and the kindly priest invited them to attend his evening prayer. The daughter waited obediently for her mother outside the door, listening to her groans. When the disheveled mother appeared from behind the door, she decided that and her daughters need to pray hard. Not Damien, and no one else in the world knew what had befallen Vera's heroine. So now she was mercilessly sacrificing others to achieve her goal. The fallen angel attacked the saint, but with a single wave of his hand, he summoned the protective Archangel Titaniel, who held the attack back. The fight between Vera's two heroes was broadcast live worldwide, because that was the Pope's own wish. But doubts gradually crept into the minds of his bishops that Saint Damien was unable to stop Vera's heroine. And yet Papa was sure of success, because the false heroine's power lay in a handful of followers trembling with fear. While the holy Damien was empowered by the prayers of more than 1 billion Catholics around the world. All they had to do now was not doubt, but pray. At the same time, the Archangel successfully repelled the attack, and Hannah realized that her powers might not be enough. While she hesitated, the guy decided to attack on his own, and summoned the beautiful Samadil cherubim, who, using a horn, brought down a shard of divine flame on the false heroine and her believers. Hannah raised a shield and ordered her followers to hold the attack, but the pressure was so strong that even an idiot would see the huge difference in faith. Hannah thought she could outsmart the enemy, break through his defense, and rip off his head. The heroine grabbed her follower and, using him as a shield, charged through the righteous fire. The plan really worked, and the girl ended up right in front of Damien, who called her. Driven by fear, Hannah brushed it off and began twisting the follower's body, which turned into a flesh blade. The heroine was about to strike Damon, but the saint broke the coward's weapon with one finger. With a second motion, Arcadius raised his arm and, with a slap, knocked Hannah's head off. Her faith turned out to be too weak. Hannah's head, falling into the sea, gradually recovered thanks to the faith of her congregation, and the girl rushed back into battle. Saint Damien accepted her challenge with a smile. Easily dodging the blows, he struck the heroine again, sending her to the seabed. But Hannah's flock, watching the broadcast, like the Catholics, was ready for any sacrifice, just to give their goddess one more chance. People gave their lives so that Hannah could be reborn again and again, trying to defeat Saint Damien. First, it repeated 100 times, then 1,000. The saint didn't understand why this girl kept being reborn and dying again and again with a smile on her face. Actually, her plan wasn't to strike a saint one day, but to sow doubt among Catholics. At one point, one of the bishops close to the Pope asked why this battle was still going on. The only conclusion that was obvious was that these people's faith wasn't enough. After Hannah's 1,000 deaths, the Catholics, who believed their God was all-powerful and their faith unshakable, began to doubt. And the deeper these doubts crept in, the easier it was for fear to take hold of them. At some point, the bishop, without even noticing it himself, changed faith and, clasping his hands, rose up together. Yes, fear has settled in the very heart of Catholic faith. No matter how strongly the Pope believed, he could do nothing about the fear that, taking hold of his priests, made them bite each other like zombies. That's when Hannah was able to reach Damien for the first time. Both felt one hero's faith weaken and fill the other. The saint was wounded, but the heroine of faith kept smiling. The power gap was growing at a frightening pace, because it was by the will of the Pope that almost all Catholics in the world were watching this fight. But the battle between the two faiths was not in the sky over the Mediterranean Sea, but in every home, every street, and every city where there were believers. In the end, Saint lost the vote on faith. However, he still had enough strength to blow off the crazy heroine's head. The guy understood that with each passing minute, his men were losing faith, so he decided to win as fast as possible. Exiled one, protector, the one with the flaming sword in hand, the one who stands before all. A heavenly gate descended from above, and Archangel Michael emerged from it. The saint pointed at the false heroine and ordered the archangel to destroy all of Christ's enemies. The heavenly warrior drew his sword, blazing with the Lord's wrath, which erases the very essence from existence, so the wounds it caused could not be healed. However, Archangel Michael's sword did not pierce Hannah, but Daniel himself. Even angels can be afraid. No one expected everything could turn out this way, with fear stronger than hope. Damien did an incredible amount for people, but those who remembered him left this world long ago. And then, Hannah, whom the whole world turned its back on, spread her fear everywhere. Fear, which was really a ticking time bomb, slowly enveloping the hearts of all people. The Vatican had anticipated that this would happen, and so it broadcast the fight to strengthen faith in Damien. But everything turned out for the worst. When Dad ordered the broadcast to stop, contact with its organizers had already been lost. The head of the Vatican could only pray. Pray to God, who, after creating this world, allowed faith and hope to be weaker than anger and fear. Even Hannah, before she decapitated the saint, saw doubt and fear in his eyes. As he fell into the sea, Damien realized he'd been gone too long, and they'd long since forgotten him. The last thing he remembered was the ocean depths swallowing his soul. And then, the saint turned out to be completely unharmed in an unfamiliar place. A nun and several children couldn't believe their eyes, but they immediately understood that Saint Damien had returned to them by God's will. The guy couldn't understand how he ended up here unharmed.
Or was it his afterlife?
The building in front of Arcadius was obviously a children's orphanage, and it was named after him. These children didn't just know about the saint, they believed in him with all their hearts. Damien was once a homeless kid himself. His parents abandoned him right after he was born, and the boy was forced to beg on the streets. The adults who took him in weren't saints. And anyway, they were not very good people who kept beating up the guy. So, at 10 years old, the little boy ran away from them and ran wherever his eyes led him. Not until I got run over by a carriage. Dying on the road, Damien dreamed of a world without orphans or hungry children. If this world didn't exist, then he was ready to create it himself. Arcadius dreamed that every child would have a chance to become the adult he himself never got to be. And now, seeing these children, the guy remembered what kind of world he dreamed of. And he realized there were still people who remembered him. The halo of the saint burned brighter than before, and he himself asked the children for a little faith. Of course, the small ones agreed, but they didn't know how to do it. Then Damien asked them to put their hands like this, close their eyes, and think about him. The little ones, by the way, folded their hands completely differently from how they were shown, and they didn't even close their eyes. But even though the saint's instructions weren't carried out, it all worked out, and pure light energy began to glow in one little one's palms. In return for this faith, the saint promised to create a world where these children could grow up. Clutching pure energy tightly in his fist, Damien returned to the Mediterranean coast, where the adults bound by fear continued to float in the sky, hands folded in prayer. By then, Hannah had already won over almost all the Catholics in the world. With a wave of her hand, the heroine of faith sent her subjects into battle. The zombie fanatics started biting into the saint, but Arcadius just endured and defended himself. He didn't try to attack people, because Damien had so little faith left.
But
this sacred power is measured not by quantity, but by quality. So the saint stoically endured all the zombie fanatics' attacks, and when the onslaught died down, Damien froze. Because right before him, Mathilde appeared, her face twisted with fear, with dark horns attack ready. A blow of overwhelming force struck the saint, who couldn't protect anyone. And still, there is still room for miracles in this world. Damien, like Christ, took the blow himself, just as he took on the Black Death of the 14th century. Hannah didn't understand what this madman was doing. She had no idea that faith is not defined by a number made up for counting. Because in a true miracle, there should always be a drop of kindness. The kindness Damien began sowing centuries ago. Giving bread to the orphans, he always asked them to repay him with kindness and care for others. These children grew into adults who, in turn, also sowed kindness in children's hearts. Those children were so moved by that sincerity that across the centuries, they carried goodness in their hearts and shared it with others. Now, the result of that faith has returned to Damien as a small handful, carrying the love and kindness of people passed down through the ages. This is Damien's spear of love. The whole meaning of Arcadius's life was in this weapon. He was sure that Hannah, fueled by fear, wouldn't be able to fend him off. But the heroine broke into hysterical laughter. Billions of people were willing to give their lives for her. Hannah could literally keep fighting for years without stopping. Even if the spear can kill her, so what? With those thoughts, the heroine snapped her fingers, but then none of the believers carried out the order. Even in the brainwashed minds of zombie fanatics, Damien's love struck a chord, and they began to weep. The saint hurled the spear of faith at the false heroine, and it went right through, striking her bitter heart. Writhed in pain, Hannah refused to give up and tried to pull the spear out of herself. But as soon as the hands touched pure, focused love, how fear left back Hannah's heart. Fear, anger, hurt, and sorrow that had bound the girl's wounded soul all her life disappeared. However, after crying, the heroine growled angrily again that no one understood her. Hannah blamed Damien for not showing up sooner and saving her from the priest. At that moment, the veil of fear began to lift from her believers. Realizing her power would soon fade, Hannah decided to make one last push and kill the saint. Then people will start fearing again and follow it. However, an instant before impact, Damien spread his arms wide, taking Hannah's blow. It shocked the girl, but she still drove into the saint, piercing his chest with his own weapon. From the very beginning, I should have comforted you, poor girl. Hannah tried to pull away from the saint, but he embraced the girl, who needed love and understanding more than she realized. It's okay, child, it'll be fine, Damien whispered in Hannah's ear, and her arms went limp, no longer resisting. At this moment, Vera's character, who instilled fear in more than 1 billion people and ruined countless lives because of her trauma, finally found peace. Damien's love and forgiveness suppressed all the negativity lurking in Vera's heart. And as soon as she accepted her fate, something like a sarcophagus woven from Vera materialized around the two heroes.
Faith's hero, back Hannah, lost.
Remaining targets, 6. The Silicon Valley transformation hero asked the military for strange support, namely to remove all civilians and all military force from west to east. She in no way wanted to belittle the military power of the US Army, but they're not capable of standing up to a hero. There's no point in sending soldiers into a battle where they'll die for nothing and won't be able to help at all. To beat a monster, you need another monster. And Mary is ready to take on the role of the monster. The president offered to provide some kind of help, but all the heroine needed to start acting was to declare a state of emergency on the West Coast and evacuate people. All right, Miss Stevenson, then we'll leave this monster to you. But before we start the operation, I want to say something to you. Don't call yourself a monster.
To me, you're a person with a big heart.
Mary had no way to express emotions or facial expressions in this spacesuit, but judging by her brief pause, the heroine was touched by those words. Miss Stevenson promised not to let the president down and cut the line. After that, she turned to the AI assistant, Asimov, and asked him to give her that child's coordinates.
Target acquired.
Departure to Los Angeles is planned. If the landing point doesn't change, no damage is expected before arrival in the city.
We need to move faster. Asimov, set the course.
A short time later, the transformation hero's drones scanned Los Angeles, but couldn't find a single living soul. But that meant nothing to Garam, and she was going to wipe this city off the face of the earth. The weapon began charging energy for a powerful blast. But suddenly, another robot appeared in front of the transformer. At a glance, Garam understood that this was a transformation hero from the last century, because his technology was quite good. I know you've already sent many people to the afterlife, and came here to wipe out innocent people. Garam couldn't understand what the old woman wanted to hear from her. Waiting for her to repent?
It's time.
Even though you killed many, there's always a chance to correct mistakes. Help humanity get back on its feet using your technology. This sentence made Garam laugh. It seems the transformation hero from the past has a malfunction. Maybe the contacts are stuck? Mary didn't see anything funny about it. She used to be human, and humans are illogical. So Stevenson gives the monster a chance. As the senior transformation hero, she offers to surrender and stop the chaos. Garam was even a little flustered. Usually, the strong give the weak a chance. And this century-old relic thinks it can be stronger than the next generation. After lowering her power limit by 30%, Garam launched missiles that slammed into Mary and were supposed to leave not even an oil stain behind. But when the smoke cleared, to her surprise, Garam found that the ancient robot was completely unharmed and shielded by a force field. But there shouldn't be such a technology in her hands. The Transformer couldn't understand where this futurism came from. Mary replied that when she returned to her world more than 100 years ago, she didn't waste any time, and using all the innovations she had brought with her, together with the people hated by the new transformation hero, she created a huge amount of weaponry so that one day they could stand against the threat posed by the new heroes. Having said that, Mary gave Asimov the order, and he unlocked the true Silicon Valley mode. Labor, thousands of human lives and the technological crown of progress, which having revealed, Mary ordered the little one to be more respectful. Manhattan Project. This was the name given to the U.S. program to develop nuclear weapons during World War II. At that time, the transformation heroine met many great scientists and saw humanity's potential for development. After the war ended, Project Silicon Valley. A city created by human will and for its protection. Just now, Mary received a message from the general staff that everyone within a 100-kilometer radius of Los Angeles has been evacuated. Knowing that no one would be hurt gave Mary confidence, and she prepared to do her duty and show the power of technology. The claws on the chain flew out at the ancient robot and, seizing it, dragged it to the Silicon Valley Command Center. Once fully synced, Mary Stevenson took control and activated combat mode. Asimov opened the rocket hatches, and the girl who had long ago cast aside all that was human to protect others ordered the launch of 12 Szilard missiles. Garam, not very impressed by the sight of Silicon Valley, wasn't even going to dodge. With the limits lowered by 70%, she raised a shield, intending to see what technologies of the last century were capable of. The booming explosions shook all of Los Angeles, and from the smoke, two beams shot out toward the floating base. Mary activated Bora's defense system, and from every building drones shot into the sky, and by combining their energy beams, they formed a protective dome that took the hit. Asimov immediately reported that the attack had been repelled, but Bora's drones were damaged by 27%. Without hesitation, Mary ordered Oppenheimer's main weapon prepared. Right in the streets between the buildings of Silicon Valley, giant laser cannons began erupting from underground and, quickly locking onto their target, opened fire. Now the mountains had to dodge, and it even got partially damaged. The hero's inner transformation Jarvis indicated that the chance of winning in long-range combat was 32%, but Garam understood she had no choice, and like a true Decepticon, having taken the form of a fighter jet, headed for Silicon Valley. This change in shape even surprised Mary. The technologies of another world have really advanced a lot, and while she was thinking about that, the fighter quickly reached the shield and hit it nose first, trying to break through the valley's defenses. Mary ordered the defensive spinner's power increased, and released the AliExpress Homelander from the chest. The steel fist, flexing his muscles, grabbed the barrier with bare hands and began tearing it apart. Mary ordered the field strengthened again, but Asimov said the drones were already working at the limit of their abilities, and if there was too much energy, they would explode. And so the Iron Fist still managed to break through the valley's defenses and open the way for the fighter Garam. Upon reaching the center of the base, it changed its form again. With this exclamation, declaring that all the achievements of the finest human minds are insignificant compared with the might of heroes. She launched hundreds of missiles. The transformation heroine, Mary Stevenson. At the beginning of the last century, the manager was a very important person. Arrived at one of the factories in Chelsea, where they made clothes. The manager was very kind to him and, taking it to the workshop, said he called repairmen from all over the area. But they couldn't control his machine. Mr. Stevenson promised to do everything possible, and the mustached guy, who treated his employees no better than cattle, ordered him to quickly determine which workshops the machines had broken down in. When he learned that Mary had gone to fix them, he flew into a rage upon discovering the scoundrel. He grabbed her right away and was about to beat her. Because that idiot didn't understand that one car like this costs more than she'd ever be able to earn in her entire worthless life. But Mr. Stevenson ordered the manager to stop. The fact was that the machine had indeed been repaired. The polite gentleman immediately asked for a chance to speak with that girl. Pouring a cup of hot English tea, Mr. Stevenson admitted he was amazed by Mary's ingenuity. She fixed it, she had no spare parts or suitable tools. Then the result achieved was quite impressive. The gentleman asked which school the girl goes to. But she had neither family nor the money for that kind of education. Mr. Stevenson took an interest in the young talent, and even without an education. And he offered the girl a job in his workshop for decent pay. At that moment, Mary had no idea that the best engineer in London was sitting right in front of her. Of course, the girl agreed and, after starting work in the workshop, began learning from Mr. Stevenson's experience. They worked until they were utterly exhausted, since they both loved their work, and soon high society remembered that London's best engineer had an apprentice, but everything changed because of one fire. In the workshop, a fire broke out, and the flames quickly engulfed the entire building. Mary wept over the body of her burned mentor, who, in her mind, he was supposed to leave his mark on history, but his whole lab, all his research and all his wealth in this world burned up in the fire. Mr. Stevens only had the surname he gave Mary that day. Mary Stevenson emerged from the fire that took a life. The girl had to take on hard labor again. But an insatiable thirst for exploration kept her up at night, and Mary continued working on Mr. Stevenson's works at such speed. In the end, her body couldn't take it, and she died from exhaustion. Her efforts were not in vain, because in the future, thanks to cooperation, the girl was able to achieve great success. But now all that Mary Stevenson had worked for was burning in the fire of projectiles that could transform a heroine. Laser weapons were quickly crushed by the Iron Hand in the name of justice. Asimov spoke of the destruction, while Mary remembered the people who had given their lives for those achievements. Could Leo Szilard have imagined that his rockets would turn out too weak? Could Niels Bohr have imagined that his defense system wouldn't last 5 minutes? What would Oppenheimer say upon learning that his weapon was destroyed? Despite all the restrictions of Silicon Valley, chains attacked the ancient robot from all sides and began taking it apart, so they could shackle what remained of Mary Stevenson's soul inside a giant mech, when Mary, after her death, would end up in another world. She had no idea what fate awaited her. To survive, like Lee Goru, she had to give up everything human. At first, these were small upgrades, like a laser in the finger for self-defense. Then, as their enemies got stronger, they had to replace their arms entirely. Soon the girls had to learn how to walk all over again, because their legs were completely replaced with powerful prosthetics from another world. In the end, to avoid irreversible injuries, they had to give up their internal organs, whose replacement was extremely painful and happened gradually. To return to your world, to the others. The girls looked less and less like those people and soon came to resemble living weapons, of course. Both heroines understood that by the end of their journey, they had already become something else. The very robots they themselves destroyed with monsters that strike fear into the hearts of ordinary people. But maybe they managed to keep something human in themselves during history's retreat. Silicon Valley rose so high it almost ended up in space, and then Mary appeared before her opponents in the form of a giant furry figurine. The steel fist had already done its job, punching through the protective barrier, and now it wasn't much of a threat to a giant like that. The transformed heroine realized this would be a one-on-one fight, and removed all restraints from her suit, activating blaster mode and growing to the size of a giant mecha. Garam was ready to unleash her full power, but Mary stood motionless, and the transforming heroine attacked first, activating her huge weapons in response. Mary was firing blasts from her hand, and every attack hit its mark, causing massive destruction, but none of them were hurt, and the opponents kept throwing themselves at each other. The new transformation heroine used rocket boosters, but Mary had a similar technique. Protected by force fields, the giant robots collided head-on, causing a colossal explosion that destroyed several blocks, but neither robot was damaged thanks to their force fields. Steel Fist, watching the battle, understood that the heroines were about evenly matched in strength, and if he could distract the enemy even a little, Garam would be able to land the deciding blow with ease. But the shot did not reach Highlander, who was distracted by the shot from behind. From what he dodged thanks to his heightened senses. Mary's robot army. Under the guidance of Asimov's artificial intelligence. We got together to deal with the remaining part of the fist, of course. This brute was surprised by opponents the size of a person, not a skyscraper. And so he threw himself into battle without hesitation. Meanwhile, the Titan's energy fields completely collapsed, and Mary, without hesitation, thrust her hand forward, grabbing Garam by the head. But the little girl instantly turned her limb into a blade and cut off the rod. Miss Stevenson, Mary wasn't surprised and sawed off the stump. Then a hammerhand rose from the ground. The owner was delivered a new limb with a rocket engine for the upgrade. Only Garam is not an idiot. And so she attacked the enemy until the transformation was complete. In that same second, a whole bundle of rockets hit the girl, stopping the attack. Which bought time and let them attach the hammer to Mary's hand. When Garam came to, Giga Sledgehammer had already taken to the air, and in the next instant, a multi-ton colossus came crashing down on the new hero transformer. However, another explosion rocked Silicon Valley, floating in the atmosphere. Garam managed to block the strike, turning her pistols into extra hands. She grabbed Mary and, by taking away her ability to move, she took a knee strike. Realizing he was losing power, Miss Stevenson activated the hammer's self-destruct mode, and it immediately began to glow. Garam managed to jump back just before the explosion. But she still lost one arm. Just like Maria's huge hair. But the enraged Garam, charging into the attack, still had two more arms and a mouth full of sharp teeth. Mary tried to defend herself, but almost immediately lost her second arm, and to add more protection she had to activate the photon laser, which pierced Garam, who turned out to be an unexpectedly cunning opponent. Asimov temporarily reduced the power and cut the power supply so that Stevenson wouldn't blow up at the same time. The Transformer asked why that old woman was fighting for humans, since she was the same monster as Garam, and couldn't understand why Mary, which returned to its own world more than 100 years ago. I didn't want to change that. She could captivate people, turning them into the goddess of her time, before whom people would bow in awe and reverence. If she had done that, then and now, no one would even dare think of going against heroes. But Stevenson decided to hide and wait, pretending to be human. To which Maria replied that she did it only because they were still people, they were gods. She never wanted to be either a goddess or a monster. She never felt like a hero or a weapon. And definitely not a car. Mary always wanted to live like an ordinary person, do what she loved and feel that someone needed her, but she was rejected, society never accepted her. However, Mary never wanted to become part of society. And all the talk on this topic has nothing to do with the fact that fate chose her to be a heroine. Stevenson never considered herself a victim. Society didn't owe her anything, but when she started acting the way she felt she needed to, and stood up for people, those same people one day returned the favor, one of the soldiers protecting the whole team. Which survived only because of her. I gave the cyborg girl a chocolate, and then Mary, and I realized that a person isn't defined by fleshly desires. Not blood in his veins. And especially depending on whether his heart is alive or mechanical. With her actions, she began to earn respect for her work and dedication to the cause. The United States of America granted Mary citizenship and asylum, and many years later, Miss Stevenson saw the broadcast celebrating the victory over fascism, by the very man who once gave her a chocolate bar. Now it was an old man who could barely stand on his feet, who, taking the medal off my chest, held it up to the camera. The veteran knew that the time allotted to him on this earth was coming to an end. So I'd like to say that the reward from his chest belongs to Mary Stevenson. In this story, the heroine from the past tried to explain to the stupid girl who was fighting her what it means to be a real person. Garam said she hates and despises people, but why does she crave their approval so much? After all, Garam does too. It was an ordinary life, parents, a favorite pastime, and a loved one. But everything fell apart when the transformation heroine returned, and no one accepted her. The people around her decided she was a monster and tried to destroy her. Now Garam thinks of herself as just a machine with the memory of a human who once walked this earth. When she opened the compartment containing her real body, the girl shouted that, since society saw her as a monster, she had decided to live up to what people had made of the heroine of transformation. The blame for this lies solely with them. Mary admitted that she partly understands this child and appreciates her sincerity, but it's time to put an end to this. Asimov's robot army has hopelessly lost to the steel fist that tore them apart with bare hands. And the artificial intelligence, watching this slaughter, could not understand at all that there are people who kill others to prove to humanity that they are the same people, and in the end,
To live in peace, they burn it down.
But it's not just about leaders who gain power they don't deserve. Ordinary citizens sacrifice other people's interests for their own and by bypassing peacekeepers, most often end up causing even more deaths in a country that's been invaded and asked for help. And all those politicians shouting about peace only provoke conflicts, while Maria was fighting the mountains. Asimov had serious doubts about people. The last robot from his army drew a laser sword, but that only pleased Steel Fist, who talked nonsense as deftly as he killed. The robot, following its creator's orders, rushed into the attack, but was inevitably defeated by an idiot shouting about justice and killing the innocent. Asimov never did understand why Maria fought for such illogical beings, but he also didn't understand why his creator's eyes had shone so brightly before. Artificial intelligence has never shown such brilliance before. Mary Stevenson, who fights only with her feet, replied to Asimov that, since she is highly evolved and doesn't understand her own actions, that proves she is a real human, not a soulless machine. Shielded by the mountains, the girl thought of scholars who, since time immemorial, had devoted themselves to research and given their lives for science, because human life is unbelievably short compared with the mysteries of the universe. No more than a fleeting moment. And the only thing that matters is what a person leaves behind. Who he will become at the moment of his death. While Garam was trying to get to the bottom of Maria, she was shouting, expressing hatred toward the whole world that had rejected her. In that moment, Mary understood that the girl, in essence, was a reflection of her own past life. If Stevenson manages to save her, that will mean that she herself will be saved. Thinking it over, Mary flew out of the exoskeleton, closing in on the enemy with her main body. Stevenson mentally turned to Asimov. Today she'll die as a human. Leave her job to the new ward and go with a clear conscience. Snatching something from her hand, Stevenson hit Garam right in the chest with the ball. The monster's enormous hand instantly tore Mary apart. But the device she shoved straight into Garam's mechanical heart stayed in place. The girl demanded to know what that old woman had done. Stevenson calmly replied that she had been working on this for the past 10 years. A full copy of a human body without a brain, a mannequin containing the mind of whoever loads this device. Tears welled up in Garam's eyes as she looked at the invention that allowed her to download more than half of the information into her mind. The girl had only one question: if the old woman had found a way to become human again, why wouldn't she use it herself with a smile on her face? The dying Maria replied that she had already become one of them. The world, and now, before death, she gives Garam a new body and another chance. When the device finished the transfer, Garam's body, with tears in her eyes, went limp, lifeless, her robot hands unclenched, and Stevenson's body crashed to the ground, shattering into many pieces. One of the surviving robots under Asimov's command came up to her and asked whether she regretted her choice. Of course, Maria didn't regret anything. The hero of Iron Hand was still alive, so the final instruction was to activate the main mechanism self-destruct. The robot nodded silently, and right before her death, Mary Stevenson asked him to take care of the child, who, once he became human, would be lost. After saying that, the girl left this world with a smile on her face. In a distant bunker, a new Mary Stevenson appeared with updated firmware. Holding her trembling palm to her face, the girl felt the warmth of her own body for the first time in a long while. Asimov slowly approached his lady, and the girl asked why Maria had saved her, Garam, and realized herself that she did not deserve that rescue. The robot replied that he didn't understand that either. Before the battle began, Mary said she wanted to save as many people as possible, but now it seemed to Asimov that all along Miss Stevenson had been trying to save only one person, or rather. One of the goals was to save the last drop of humanity still left inside Garam, and as a result Silicon Valley was destroyed with Mary Stevenson, Garam, and Steelfist. No one knew about Garam's consciousness being transferred into a new body. Thus, the girl was completely free and got a chance at a new life as a real person, kneeling before her new mistress. Asimov asked why she now regretted that Garam couldn't answer right away, and he'd been thinking for hours earlier. She ended up right in the middle of the clash between heroes and humanity. Now she had a choice: flee and live out the rest of her days in peace in a world torn apart by heroes, or continue her atrocities by turning to Woo Sung-joon for help. Perhaps even restoring her original body, but there was another option. Having made his decision, Garam stood up and asked Asimov if he knew where the spear hero was now. "Sorry, I understand. Are you waiting for my answer about where I teamed up with the American government? We've almost pinned down his location." Garam asked Asimov to get her to the spear hero as fast as possible. She needs to tell him something before the spearman meets the hero. Speaking of him, at that time, he was still at the base. A Korean government official, Sun Jun, watched the broadcast as a pair of his team's strongest heroes got beaten, and the leader was sealed away by some Soviet old man from the presidential council. Erasing the teammate's father from the game, Sun Jun grew serious about their situation. After handing over the revolver, the guy had already shoved it into his mouth. Had been setting up a regular jump in the past, but then a creature suddenly distracted him from offing himself. Even though Kim Min-soo was trapped in an ice block, allies from another world came to help him. Sung Jun couldn't miss such a sight, and before returning, he decided to keep hanging on to the old man's priestess and kiss. The team of sword hero comrades, no one thought it was possible to summon comrades from another world, but in any case Ivan Pushkin was different in that these heroes get along with every sword leader, so he decided to deal with the killer before they succeeded in some politics and made an ice axe. Was about to cut down that cocky pup, but she shot an arrow in a flash, pierced his palm, and the old man lost his comrade's respect. Min-soo quickly realized what was going on. Their world savior was encased in ice, and some old man was trying to kill him. Around the ruined frozen city, this just couldn't be done.
Their comrade, that one.
Good that the hero saved the whole world. Exhausted, Ivan tries to explain that things aren't as they seem at first glance, but Pushkin wasn't an idiot and didn't hope he believe him, because he's trying as fast as he can to kill the crazed pup. Only a few arrows blocked his path. Ivan looked around. For the elf girl, who had already clearly made up her mind, this old villain priest started casting a rescue spell and asked the others to use the signal. The tanking dwarf didn't know how long they could hold out against the old man, that they turned out stronger than the hero's sword, the martial artist who was supposed to be the standard. Repay the debt to Minsu, who saved their world from the demon. The fairy believed everything would work out, and the archer suggested starting the battle for their savior's life as soon as possible. On the night after the demon heroes were killed, before Minsu went home, the priestess came to him with her staff. She didn't know whether her magic would work in a different world, but she wanted to thank her savior somehow, so she placed a spell on him that would show how much time the hero had left to live if he faced mortal danger, and someone came to help and save him. That's exactly what happened that day when Minsu was defeated by the ice hero. Ivan Pushkin, while the warriors suddenly the old man fairy sealed their comrade and summoned the spirit of the Ifrit, which unleashed a powerful stream of fire on the prisoner trapped in the ice, but his prison remained untouched. Using a spell to search for the hidden priestess, they were able to understand that this was not just ice but an intricate spell from the typewriter's side. Only the priestess removed them, because the fairy created Voeven and used such powerful techniques to defeat Minsu that he had almost no strength left to hope that Pushkin's opponents would turn out to be weaklings, retreating from the alien. And the old man summoned a flock of seagulls, but then a dwarf appeared, and with his shield he cast an indestructible barrier, slamming into the birds, which shattered into ice fragments. The dwarf reminded the kid that you can't let your guard down against him, they're no rookies, and told them to work as a team. Meanwhile, the archer sent an arrow into the sky. Apologizing to his comrades for taking so long to figure out the flow of mana in this world, a huge wave lit up in the sky above the ice hero, and in the next moment, at the archer's command, a rain of arrows came crashing down on him. The old man had no choice but to use his magic and summon a turtle. Hiding under it from the gunfire, Ivan realized his mana was almost gone. When the deadly rain stopped, he decided to get up and engage his opponents in close combat, but at that moment an otherworldly talk fell on him from the sky, prepared his most powerful strike, and materialized huge fists of an old man's aura from. Again, power summoned the hero's turtle, but the boy's strike was so powerful that it swept away the old man along with his protector, so Ivan Pushkin Ice turned out to be stronger than the sword hero thanks to teamwork and the element of surprise for the first time in his life. Defeated, he braced himself to face his own death. Carried the strike for Ito's finishing blow, but suddenly cold gripped his body. Snowflakes fell over the transfer field, and their slow drift seemed to freeze time. Past the boy who couldn't move, walked a girl paler than death itself, and she came down to the fallen old man, this witch, this icy lady from the world, who saved Ivan Pushkin and placed a cool hand on Grandpa's forehead and said he had lost his former strength in the place where only the body of an old man remained. Why are you here? Where is the new hero? The icy lady replied that the new hero had defeated the demon and now her whole world was gone. Pushkin understood that this a capricious girl came to him at the moment of death just because she has nothing else to do and wants to watch the old man's death, but he was mistaken. The ice lady wanted something else, pointing at the sword comrade. The hero the witch asked, so, does Pushkin write with them? In the end I understood why you're leading a troublesome girl, give me the power to protect my world. The sorceress lit up, but first she asked what she'd get in return.
My life? My soul? Anything.
If my world is saved, then take it all. Stop the war, that's my final wish. The rest doesn't matter. The sorceress grew sad again.
Life.
She won't take Ivan, will she? He'll die soon enough, and she takes souls. She can't do that. That's the law of the universe. Using that same law, the Ice Lady can take his memories. Let her give back his long story, how Ivan went to war, then became a hero, how he stopped the invincible army, and why he announced. Christina is now a witch. She wanted to take all of Ivan Pushkin's memories, who had spent her whole life pretending for world peace with a smile on the old man, understanding what she was offering this girl, was ready to take a desperate step. Tears ran down the witch's cheeks, delighted by Ivan's determination, and she. In the end, she pressed her icy lips to his cheek after that girl dissolved into the tiniest snowflakes, and the cold stopped for a moment. As Ito came to himself after her disappearance, he first turned to check that his companions were all safe and sound, then he rushed into the crater to the old man, to him. A girl came by, stopping time. Dwarf immediately understood what was going on and shouted for everyone to get ready, so the girl could revive him. With that cry, the big guy ran toward the crater after his comrade, but at that very second Ito jumped out of the yard. Dwarf asked what happened. Instead, the guy ordered him. Run back, because the next moment thousands of frozen bones burst from the crater, forming a tower-like shape in the center, on which the silhouette of an ice throne appeared, where the Lich King sat, having sacrificed his memories. Ivan Pushkin gave up his humanity and turned into a monster. Wanted only to kill all the enemies in his world, the courtyard, making sure the girl turned the old man into a corpse, but he immediately realized he was wrong. This wasn't just a moving corpse, radiating a chill aura. It was clear at once that this lich was many times stronger than the demon who defeated the sword hero in the later parts, with a powerful lich beat. Ilyich and more can be watched right now, no waiting at all, via the links in the pinned comment on Boosty or Patreon.